what's up, everybody? Isaac here, Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Today, I bring on Alex Kolkena. He has a fascinating story working for the federal government. He actually, started his journey in the military, found his way into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and currently works for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, doing some pretty cool stuff. So I wanted to get him on the show and talk about his journey to become a civil engineer, professional engineer, and how he worked his way into the federal government doing these very unique projects. I think it would be a fascinating show to listen to, because if you're ever wondering if this is a route that maybe you could go, he definitely points out the things that you should do to do that. But anyway, really great episode today. I'm looking forward to chatting with him and for you guys to listen to it. If you're enjoying these episodes, please give us a like and give us a subscribe. We always have good stuff for you. And if you need help on your own journey to become a professional engineer, definitely check out our website at civilengineeringacademy.com. All right, Alex coming up right after this. Hey, I wanted to jump on real quick and let you know about a free resource we developed for you. You can find it at civilengineeringacademy.com/PE guide, and this will help you to jumpstart your studies for your PE exam. So if you're in the hunt and you're just thinking about the PE exam, this guide will help you get through the process of figuring out everything you need to do, from the PE exam's prerequisites that you got to figure out, the must-have materials that you're going to need for the exam, any approved calculators, what groups you should join, exam secrets, and much more. It's all in this guide that we've got developed for you. It's completely free. You can go check it out at civilengineeringacademy.com/PE guide. Just put in your email. We'll get you that information as soon as the email comes to your inbox. So go check it out, civilengineeringacademy.com/PE guide. All right, we are live and running. Alex, how's it going? Welcome to the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. I'm excited you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. So I think your background and the projects and just your work experience is pretty unique, and wanted to bring you on and kind of talk about that and kind of give a bigger picture as to where, I guess, potential civil engineers that are looking to become civil engineers, or maybe they're working already and they want to go into a field that's more in line with what you're doing, how they might be able to do that. But before we even dive into that, why don't you just give us your own background, and maybe why the military route? How did you end up where you're at?
Well, like many military personnel, I actually grew up a military brat. My dad was enlisted in the Air Force for 21 years, and I grew up moving all over the world. I lived in California, Turkey, Germany, Italy, Guam, Alaska, all these places I grew up in. And growing up, I always felt in the back of my mind that I was going to follow in my dad's footsteps, that I was going to join the military too. So my dad enlisted right out of high school, and he ended up retiring at the rank of Master Sergeant. He originally enlisted as a radar tech, but he encouraged us growing up to study hard and get good grades and prepare for college. He really wanted us to get an education because he never had the opportunity to do so growing up. So I ended up graduating from high school in Germany at Ramstein High. There is such a large American contingency in Germany that we had our own American high school there on the base with 1,000 kids.
Wow.
Right.
Did you have to learn any new languages if you've moved around so many places?
Mostly just how to order food and ask for directions.
Got it.
Because all these places I moved to, they had American schools for us that we would attend.
Okay.
So I probably could have taken advantage and learned a bit more. In fact, that's one of my regrets. But yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be using German that much anyways here in New Mexico. So I was in high school, and I decided I was going to apply for an ROTC scholarship and use that to pay for school. And I was awarded one. I enrolled in Army ROTC over at Brigham Young University, and I chose civil engineering as my major. And what made me choose civil engineering was actually, I took an AutoCAD class my sophomore year in high school, and I decided I really liked it. And I like messing around with AutoCAD. So I saw that BYU's civil engineering program included an AutoCAD class, and I knew I wanted to do something science or engineering related. So I went ahead and picked that. Now,
Wow.
the Army doesn't really care what you major in because the mission of the Army is to lead soldiers. It's a little bit different on the Air Force or Navy side because they have a lot more technical jobs. So they require many of their officers to get science or engineering degrees. But the Army, it doesn't really matter either way. But I knew in the back of my mind, there was always a chance that I might not make it through the program. I might get sick. I might get injured. Or later down the line, I might decide the military wasn't for me. So, um, so my, I made it through BYU's engineering program. I was not a stellar student. I was always somewhere in the middle. And I ended up commissioning as an engineering officer. And at the time, I was planning on being career military. I didn't really plan on using my degree. I thought I was going to be a career soldier. And being an engineer officer in the Army, it's not like being an engineer in the civilian world. It's all about blowing stuff up and route clearance patrol and sometimes just fighting as infantry.
Hmm.
The Army Engineer Corps is a combat arms unit. Most engineer units are combat engineer units.
So what was the benefit of getting a civil engineering degree? Not only did you like it, but it got you into an officer status. Or I mean, what is that? I guess you always had a goal to kind of stay in the military, but it obviously helped you.
It did because later on, when I was a lieutenant in the Army, we had a program in which they would send us to go work alongside civilian engineers in the Army Corps of Engineers. Now, you have to make the distinction. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is a government agency that falls under the Department of the Army, but it's staffed over 95% by civilians.
Oh, really?
Right. So there are some active duty engineer officers and NCOs who hold positions at different offices within the Corps of Engineers, mostly leadership and management positions. But for the most part, it's all run by civilians. And they have a very diverse mission, USACE does.
So help us understand, because I don't know if there's a good understanding, but how would someone go about working for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? How did you get there after you were in you were an officer in the military? How did you make your way into there?
Okay, so if you want to work for the Army Corps of Engineers or any federal job, really, you do it through a website called USA Jobs. So you log on to usajobs.gov and you create a profile on there and you can upload all your transcripts from college. You create a resume and they have a template that you can build a resume on. And from there, you can search for jobs based on various criteria like geographic, pay grade, what focus you want to be on, what agency you want to work for. And you just apply for jobs using that system. And it's a pretty straightforward system, but the only problem is that due to all the red tape and bureaucracy that surrounds government employment, you could apply for a job and not hear back for weeks or months.
That definitely makes sense. I've heard this before.
Right. So one of the
I've also, maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, but I've also heard that if you have a connection that's already working there, it's much easier to get through. But maybe I'm not speaking correctly. You probably still have to go through that.
You still have to go through the process, but part of the resume that you have to put together for a federal job will include references. And I found that if the right people recommend you for a job, that helps a lot. Especially if they're taking someone in from the outside, someone from another district or someone off the street. Once you're in the system, I found it's a lot easier to apply for jobs and get interviews. But just coming off the street with no prior federal experience, it can be a bit of a challenge.
That makes sense. Okay, well, talk about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. What's it like working for them? What's something you really enjoyed about working for them?
Well, the great thing about the Army Corps of Engineers, well, you should know, is the sheer diversity of the missions that they have, because their focus is infrastructure. USACE is the largest public works agency in the world. And they had their hands in a lot of things. And what I did mostly was what we call MILCON, military construction, which is whenever the military needs a new building, a new hospital, a new drainage system, they would work hand in hand with the Army Corps of Engineers. We would figure out what their needs are, and we would put together a scope of work and put out a request for proposal and find a civilian architecture engineering firm or a builder to take their needs and put it together into some kind of project. So the Army Corps of Engineers has kind of that management oversight mission, but they also do a lot of civil works, which involves civilian infrastructure. And a good example of that is our nation's navigable waterways. The Mississippi, the Ohio, the Columbia, St. Lawrence River, the Great Lakes, any waterway that is big or deep enough that you can ship goods on it, the Army Corps of Engineers is in charge of removing debris and keeping the waterways safe, controlling the waterways, preventing a flood disaster, because the Corps of Engineers constructs and operates a lot of dams and locks and a lot of just infrastructure in place that keeps those rivers flowing, because a lot of goods are still shipped over the Mississippi. If you look at the history of the United States and its economic development, a lot of it centers around those navigable rivers. That's why so many of our greatest cities are located along the Mississippi or the Ohio. You can think of St. Louis, Memphis, Cincinnati, Louisville, or even the manufacturing belt in the Midwest. Part of the reason why the Rust Belt was located in the Great Lakes area is because the Great Lakes made moving raw material from port to port, from city to city, so efficiently.
That makes sense. They had a pretty big hand with hurricanes, right? I believe Hurricane Katrina.
Absolutely.
I think they helped develop levees and infrastructure for that in case another hurricane hit. When did you start with them? When did you start with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers? Were you involved with any of that stuff, or was that?
That was before my time.
Okay.
So, one notable project that I was involved in was the construction of a new facility on Fort Meade in Maryland, which is the home of the National Security Agency. We were building a new building for them. And that was a $650 million building. And we had just a gigantic office in a trailer right next to this construction site. And we had a staff of about 35, 40 of us all working on this project. And we were working hand in hand with Clark Construction, who was the third-party civilian contractor. And that was just a real amazing project that I got to work on, because I would go out to that construction site every day and just see the sheer magnitude of it, and see, because I started fairly early on in that project, and I got to see a project of that size and scale take shape. And that was fascinating. Another project that I worked on was Task Force Barrier. And this is one that was in the news because it's better known as the border wall.
Okay.
And that is a $2.5 billion project of installing a 30-foot fence along the southern U.S.-Mexico border.
So I always hear conflicting things, that we're building it, we're not building it. I've never heard what stage of the process that thing is being done. But
I should caveat this by saying that I actually left the Corps of Engineers before the project was completed.
Okay.
And to my understanding, most of it's been completed already. And despite, I don't want to get involved in the political discussion surrounding it, but despite we hear a lot in the press, the actual mission of the fence itself isn't all that controversial. It wasn't intended to keep out migrants, because migrants who have a passport can enter the United States legally at any port of entry. In fact, thousands of people do it every day. They
Mm-hmm.
commute between, for example, Ciudad Juarez and El Paso, going back and forth just across that international bridge. But I think the idea behind the wall was that because it was actually Customs and Border Patrol were the owners of that project. The Corps of Engineers just played a supporting role.
Okay.
And the idea of building a taller fence was so that the Border Patrol would have time to track and capture whoever's trying to sneak across the border. And the people they had in mind weren't ordinary folks looking for a better life in the U.S. It was human trafficking, drug dealers, that sort of thing. So I was definitely involved in that project.
Sounds like a huge project.
It was, I've never worked on a project of that scale and magnitude before, but it was impressive.
Making a lot of site visits.
Absolutely. We'd go down to the El Paso area or down to southern New Mexico or Arizona or Texas. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I just never heard quite where that was, but I do know it's important to protect our borders, and it's you followed a mission that you had, and that's neat. So where did you go after the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers?
well, after I was with the Corps of Engineers, I switched over to my current employer, which is the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. And
Okay.
DITRA, our mission over there is all about providing the Department of Defense and the U.S. government and our allies with enhanced strategies to counter terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. So we're constantly...
Sounds like a big mission.
It is. So we're constantly looking into and researching emerging threats, and we can run tests on bomb threats and blast protection, that sort of thing. And as civil engineer, I work on a lot of projects that test out our defensive capabilities and that sort of thing.
It sounds so unique, such a unique position. So I guess I'm always curious how people found themselves into these unique positions, but it makes sense with the stepping stones that you've taken to get there. You talked a little bit about education. I imagine that the FE and the PE exam have been part of that journey. Any tips surrounding those that are struggling to take those or even repeating them? I don't know what your exam experience was like, but any tips around those?
Well, I took the FE right when I graduated from college. And the FE, the challenge with it is just the sheer breadth of information that's covered in one exam. When I took it, it was paper-based. I know it's all on computer now. Mm-hmm. So what I tell people, your best bet when studying for the FE is to get a copy of the Civil Engineer Reference Manual and also get a copy of the exam specifications where it lists what type of questions will be on there and how many there will be, and use that as your study guide. Use that as your checklist, because the FE, it's you have to know your stuff to pass the FE, but if you do know your stuff, you should pass. And as far as the PE goes, I actually took, 7 years after I took the FE. It was after I separated from the Army, because I hadn't, you have to realize at the time, I didn't think I was going to work again as a civil engineer. I thought I would be career military, but that didn't pan out for me. So I ended up taking it in 2017. Yeah. So the thing about the PE exam is that it's very heavy on concepts as opposed to computation. And I think a lot of shortcuts that young engineers take is they think they can just memorize a bunch of equations and memorize a process without really understanding what's happening at a conceptual level. And that is one of the biggest pitfalls, because on the P exam, they can ask you questions like, if you push here, which way will this move? Type questions.
Yeah.
Or they'll throw in superfluous information to try to trip you up. The P exam isn't hard. It's just tricky, I found.
It's true.
There's one right answer, there's three traps, and those sneaky engineers who are writing the exam, they're thinking, how could they misread this? How could we mislead this guy?
How
And
can we put some answers in here that,
Mhm.
that are good answers, but not the right answer?
also, and as far as engineers who don't pass on their first or their second or their third try, I just tell them, look at your diagnostic, look at what you got wrong, see if you can study harder. I had a friend over the Army Corps of Engineers. He was in the cubicle next to mine, and he studied like crazy for the PE exam. First time he took it, didn't even come close to passing.
Hmm.
And he was frustrated, he was angry. And I said, you know what? You either win or you learn. You never lose. So take this as a learning experience. And he did. He had a much better idea of how he should prepare for it the second time around. And the second time around, he took the exam, he breezed through it.
That's great advice. I love that little saying that you said, you either win or you learn. A lot of people that have taken this exam, and we deal, people that come through our courses or find our material, a lot of times they're repeat takers as well. And they get discouraged quite a bit. And, a big part of this taking the exam is kind of the mental game, the attitude. And I know it feels like a waste of money when you're having to repeat this stuff, but it's going to be great. It's going to be good for your career. There's personal gratification, achievement that you've got when you get this thing done and over with. And once it's done, and you never have to really get that again.
For sure. For sure.
Um,
And it's totally worth the investment. It's worth the time. It's worth the money. And once you get that credential, there will never be an asterisk saying PE, but he failed the exam a few times. So a PE is a PE.
That's right. Well, Alex, I want to kind of bug you a little bit about what would be attractive for a civil engineer to go the route that you did versus maybe the public or private sector route. Their benefits, is there trade-offs? Do you even know maybe what a starting salary might be if someone got into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, things like that?
Well, I should first say that while I was serving active duty as an Army engineer officer, I didn't really get to use my degree and I didn't really get to develop the skill set, the professional skill set as an engineer. I was mostly doing just typical Army stuff, leading troops, conducting inventories, planning out training operations, going to firing ranges, which was a lot of fun.
Sure.
But I have no regrets in joining the military. And it was mostly because of the personal growth that I experienced while I was in and the life skills that I developed while I was in. The military was never a good fit for me. It was never a natural fit because well, in high school, I was obese. I was a couch potato. I played video games all day. I never played any sports. I was in terrible shape. When I first tried joining ROTC, I failed the physical fitness test twice. I didn't even come close to passing the run. But it was that summer before my senior year where I started working out like crazy just so I can qualify. I still wasn't a top athlete, but at least I was qualified while I was in college. But the Army taught me a lot of discipline. It taught me leadership. It taught me how to plan. And it taught me how to meet deadlines. Other really important life skills. I changed so much and I feel like a much better, stronger, more resilient person because of my time in service. So for that reason, I don't regret it at all. Even if it didn't go towards developing the professional skill set I'm using now. And it did to a certain point. I will say that it did to a certain point. But yeah, I have no regrets in my desire to serve in the military. And I was let's say I joined the military at the height of the Iraq War. I joined ROTC when they were just handing out scholarships to everybody because they were understaffed. They needed more people as part of the global war on terror. But when around 2014, 2015, that's when the Army began its drawdown. And like, I didn't do anything stupid, but I did draw the shortest straw, and I ended up getting an involuntary discharge from the military.
Hmm.
And I decided I was going to actually, I did not go straight into government service coming out of the military. I actually tried my hand at the private sector first. And I worked for a small company there. And long story short, that didn't pan out for me either. And I ended up getting laid off. And another thing I should say, a good skill set for engineers to have is resilience when you get laid off or you don't get the job that you want. And that's just to keep at it.
Or even job changes, because when you change jobs too, you're trying to relearn or learn a new kind of culture and system and things of that nature. So
It
I think
was hard to adapt.
yeah, that's great advice. Do you find that I guess going through the government side of things, there's probably better benefits, I imagine, than working for a contract outfit, but maybe the salaries are different.
It would depend a lot on several factors, because I think overall the salaries are probably better on the private sector. The salaries in professional development are a little bit better on the private sector. However, there are several advantages to working for the government instead. And most obvious one is job security, because even in an economic downturn, or if there's a lack of clients, or you think of 2008 when the financial crisis caused construction and new development just to grind to a halt. A lot of engineers got laid off. And the fortunate thing about government work is that it's not tied as much to the economy. It is to a certain extent, but not nearly as much. So there's greater job security working for the government. And there's also the Federal Employee Retirement System, or FERS. So if you put in a certain amount of years, you are eligible for a pension.
That's awesome. Plus 401k.
There's also the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan, that you get 5% matching on. And the great thing about government service is that you can change a different office or a different agency, and your years of service and towards retirement will all carry with you. You can make that seamless transition. So when I switched over from Army Corps of Engineers to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, I didn't lose any of my seniority. I stopped one pay period and started another.
That's awesome. So it sounds like there's definitely some benefits going that route. And so this has, been eye-opening. If people are considering this route, it's definitely something they should check into. But
For sure. It's definitely ideal for veterans, because I should tell you one other benefit to working for the federal government coming out of the military is that they'll let you buy back your time. And what that means is, if you repay 3% of your total earnings that you had while you were on active duty back to the government, they will take all the years of service from when you're on active duty and have it count towards your civilian pension.
whoa,
Yeah, which is a pretty good deal.
that's awesome. Well, geez, a lot of benefits there for people that are considering working for the federal government. So that's definitely eye-opening. I don't know. Is there any other tips or advice that you would have for someone that wanted to follow in your footsteps?
Well, something that I wish I had done earlier, and that is try to join the Reserve or National Guard as a drill status guardsman, because I was actually out for 5 years and I decided I really missed the military, but I didn't want to do it full time. I liked my civilian job. So I got in touch with recruiters over at the New Mexico Air National Guard, and I interviewed with them, and they said, sure, we'll take you on. So I'm I'd been out of the military for 5 years. I was 35 years old, married, had a kid. And I said, you know what? I'm rejoining the military. And I went
They
in.
give you a sign-on bonus or?
No, they didn't. And I mean, you do get drill pay, but for me, serving in the Air National Guard, it's not about the money. It's all about being part of a team and wearing the uniform and serving my country and the fulfillment that comes from that. And my unit within the Air National Guard is the 210th Red Horse Squadron. And its main mission is to repair airfields and other infrastructure that are necessary for aircraft to take off and land.
Wow.
So I do that along with working over at DITRA full time, and it works really well. Another benefit I should mention to being a federal employee is that you get 120 hours of paid leave for military duty. So that means if the National Guard activates me to go do something, I can draw 2 paychecks. Yeah, get full pay from both sides while I'm doing that. So that's
Have you ever been called out?
I have not been deployed overseas yet, but I did get activated on what are called state active duty orders, which is usually when there's a statewide disaster like flooding or fires, they can activate National Guard members. They usually ask for volunteers. I volunteered for it. And you could leave your civilian job for a few weeks and go work in a disaster response center. And that's what I did to help mitigate the effects of flooding we had here in northern New Mexico last year. And that was a really great experience. That's that you get to do if you're in the National Guard is you can serve right here at home when there's a crisis. We even had during COVID, we had so many teachers who were sick and unable to go to school. They activated some National Guard members to be substitute teachers.
Whoa. That's cool. Is there an age cutoff to be in the National Guard?
So the age in which they'll allow people to join, it changes from year to year, depends on the needs of the military. I don't know what it is right now, but you can join at age 17 with your parents' permission, or I think it's like 39, 40 years old, but the mandatory retirement age last I checked is 60. Don't quote me on that. And there are some people who stay in until they're 60.
Wow, they just love it.
Right.
That's awesome.
That's kind of what I'm planning to do right now. It's I love being part of this team. We have a great unit and it works so well. It works hand in hand with my civilian job.
That's great. Well, this has been fascinating, Alex. I've appreciated you sharing your wisdom with us. If anybody had any questions, what's the best way for them to reach out to you if they wanted to, I guess, bug you with more questions?
Okay, well, I can be reached on LinkedIn, that website, and I have strangers connect with me on there all the time or message me on there, and it can be people who've seen something I posted on YouTube or something like that, just ask me questions, and I'm more than happy to answer anyone's questions. That's what I'm here for.
For sure. And what's your YouTube channel?
If you just search for my name, it'll pop up.
Okay, we'll bring that up. We'll put it in the show notes. Make sure people can find it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will warn you, they're not fancy videos. They're very janky videos.
That's okay. It'll be good. Well, thank you for doing this. Again, lots of information. I think it's a really good route to go. And thank you for sharing your wisdom with us, Alex. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And it's, I will say, there is so much fulfillment to be had working as an engineer in whatever capacity for the Department of Defense.
Sounds great. Thank you, Alex.
All right. Thank you so much.
See ya.
Bye.